So I've always been a huge fan growing up of the Arlstein books. So that's a huge inspiration for me, just in terms of horror right there, and also the fact that I made a monster film as my first film. And secondly, also I was a huge fan of. I love everything that's interactive, especially in the horror world. So, for example, I played a video game that was released by DreamWorks Interactive, also in the Goosebumps world by Arlstein, called Escape from Horrorland. That was phenomenal, and it was a very atmospheric-driven video game, and also had a lot of monsters in it. So there's that, and also worked for a long time in a play here in Los Angeles called Delusion, which is a live interactive horror play that involved uh, some special effects creatures and especially a lot of stunts. So that's kind of also, I think, influenced me to kind of tackle this first film the way that I did and to come up with that idea. But I watched a film, I don't know, it inspired me because I think it was a vampire film, but it was called The Hamiltons, and it was a film about a family of vampires that live together, but you don't find out that they're vampires until the very end. But I kind of started coming up with the idea. I've been trying to make my first film for a while called Carnival, which is a very expensive movie to start off with, which I realized was just not going to happen. So I said, okay. I met Phil Siebel, who's my producing partner on the film and DP and editor, and we realized, I mean, we were getting along so well. We said we have to make a film together, and so we started thinking of some ideas, and I came up with the idea of the Monster Project, and it was, yeah, based on the Hamiltons, just because I was like, okay, like how cool is it, this story about a family of vampires live together. How cool would it be if I made a movie about a group of filmmakers that decide to go into a family of vampires, into their home to interview them, and they realized, because my love for monsters kind of kicked in, I said, what if I made a movie about a group of filmmakers that decide to interview like a multitude of monsters, and so then that's kind of like how the Monster Project came about. It's just the variety of types of monsters included in that aspect of the interviews. Sure. Well, the story is about a group of filmmakers that decide to interview monsters. So for me, it was always going to be about. It was always going to have to be shot through the perspectives of their cameras. It's the way that I saw it, and I really enjoyed that because it really makes you feel like there's a reality to what's happening, and it really includes you in the moments. And I think that the aspects, the idea that I had of adding a GoPro to the main character's forehead, and to experience what he's feeling, not only also during the interviews, because it's very character driven, the film, but also to be there as him during the action scenes, kind of similar to perspective, shooter video games, was an interesting kind of spin on that style of filmmaking, which I think made it stand out, so that it wasn't just a found footage film, but also a first person perspective film, which I think is different. There's a difference there, but it's a combo of both styles. I knew some of the actors beforehand. Muriel Zucker, who plays Muriel, Shiori Idita, who plays Shiori, and Stephen Flores, who plays Steven the Skinwalker. And then I casted Jamal Quizer by doing casting myself with Phil Siebel and Shrilin, who's my co-writer at the time. And he just came into the audition and just made us laugh so hard. And we didn't have. He brought that character was not funny at the time. Actually, Devin, the one of the main characters, was originally had kind of a comedic style to him, and we actually swapped that for the Jamal character after we discovered Jamal. And then after that, then Bass Casting came on board and brought the other actors that you see in the film. The film was not easy to make. We had 15 days to shoot it with a lot of stunts and practical effects, so that was stressful. Uh, yes, I think that we were having a very hard time filming this basement scene. That's quite actually a long scene in the film. Um, every day at the end of the day, or at the end of the night, because we'd film overnights, we would run down to the basement and try to get something out of this scene, and we kept doing that day after day, and it was just a very difficult scene for us to pull off, and we actually had to do a reshoot for that scene because we weren't able to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish on the first round of shooting for that scene. There was a missing element, and so we had to go back there for a quick reshoot. So that scene, I remember us being there and just realizing that we were running out of time, and that the schedule was getting very tight, and it was just that basement scene was just very difficult. So, but we kept pushing. We went, we went all the way, and I have to say, filming the film was a lot of fun. It was challenging, but it was like a playground to me. It's like what I've been looking forward to, because it took about 2.5 years of prep, if not more, to find funding, etc. So it was a long time, and so actually being there on set to execute it, was just a lot of fun. I I think that I came away with it just I really it was my first feature, and I realized that yes, I really love directing a feature film. It was a lot of fun. So because I'd done some short films before, but mainly commercials, and so this was my first feature, and I really enjoyed directing a full length feature. So so yeah, I think that's what I came away with it. So I'll tell you. So I'll tell you an anecdote from when I was young about that. So the reason why I think people like horror so much, when I was a child, there was a book that my grandmother used to read to me when I was a baby, and then growing up as a child, etc. It was called. So I'm French originally, so it's a French book called La Chèvre de Monsieur Seguin, which is the goat of Mr. Seguin, and it's a story about a goat that, anyways, it just ends up in it ends in a very dark way. It's super dark, and it's got a wolf involved in it. And I remember just not just being so scared of the book's cover, and so I would hide it in my bookshelf, but I would still dare myself to go and pull it out just to look at it, and then I would just not be able to sleep for hours. I still would dare myself to look at it, right? So there's something, I think it's like the fascination of being terrified of something but also loving it at the same time, that is confusing for the human brain, but entertaining nevertheless, because you don't understand and you know that you're safe, regardless, you're still afraid. And so I think that not everybody likes that, but most people like to dare themselves. That's why people go on roller coasters. It's the same thing. It gives you adrenaline, and it's not something that you usually experience in your life unless you're actually afraid, right? So there's a lot of them. My top three would be Tim Burton, Sam Raimi for Evil Dead 2, which is my favorite horror film of all time. Tim Burton, Sam Raimi, and James Cameron for Aliens. Those are my favorite three director who I influence myself from in the for horror. Well, it depends. For the Monster Project, it was quite different because the film revolves around a lot of them bringing a realism to the character, because it's supposed to feel like a real life documentary for most amount of the film. So for me, it was just making sure that they bring kind of that real life aspect to their character, and that their interactions seem believable and realistic. So it was all kind of about balancing that aspect of it, and realizing also sometimes, you guys know the scene. This is a scene, like there was this, my favorite scene, for example, one of my favorite scenes is a scene between, a confrontational scene. It's the interview with a vampire between Toby Hemingway and Yvonne Zima, or Brian and Shayla, the vampire. And that scene, I remember approaching the actors, and they said, "Okay, let's rehearse it." I said, "No, you guys are not going to rehearse that scene." That was, I think, one of the only scenes where I did that. I said, "Do not rehearse that scene. Jump right into it." Both of those actors, I mean, they're very good actors, and both of them did that scene for the auditions, and so I was very comfortable just letting them flow with it, and so they went with it, and it was. I think we did 2 or 3 takes of it, but the first take ended up being the one that we used the most in the film. Yeah, yeah, it was very important to us to make sure that that film had a very strong character development, uh, because a lot of the films that are in the kind of documentary style filmmaking, so a lot of people say found footage films, uh, don't really include that strong of a character development. So Shariah and I made sure that the first half hour or whatever of the film was very strongly oriented towards developing those characters in a very strong manner. So I know, and I, I think it's very important for a director to trust their actors and to give them the ability to play as well, because it depends for the scenes, of course, but for that scene specifically, I wanted to make sure that they just got to jump into it and have some fun with it. Oh yeah, editing wise, it we actually edited the first cut of the film, I think, in 1 week. It was very quick. The first cut, of course, it was, I think, 2 hours long, or 2 hours and 10 minutes long at first. But no, Phil and I worked very closely on the editing, and I think there was there's some very complicated scenes because there are so many different point of views, and you want to make sure that you are using the proper point of view for to communicate certain aspects of the scene, or to also show what is important to show so you don't get lost and confused. I think that the scene that was very difficult to cut for us to edit was the initial transformation of the monsters. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things happening. A lot of characters involved in that scene. A lot of perspectives, different points of views from the camera. So that scene was a challenge to cut, and so we kept recutting until we felt that we had it right. Goosebumps for grown-ups.